I have a very inexpensive pitcher here that failed. It developed several cracks in it, and the number of cracks seem to be increasing over time, as well as the length and the extent of the cracks seem to be increasing. After a while this pitcher is not going to be watertight. So in this video I want to share a little bit about how and why plastics fail. We'll also look at what plastics, honey, a bag of rice, Lego, plastic toys, metal toys, and washing machines. I have a washing machine part here next to me. What they all have in common that explains how and why plastics fail. Possible culprits include the kids, my wife of course, don't tell her, she doesn't know. Maybe something's wrong with the dishwashing, or is it the manufacturer's fault? So before we go anywhere, let's take a look at the cracks, how they look like. There are several cracks, but they can be grouped into two types. One type of cracks are long and they run somewhat parallel with each other, just curving minimally around the surface. These cracks seem to start at the surface here, there, and it seems to be going through the entire thickness of the plastic, right at the starting at the edges, and they also come out to the outside because my nail catches on them, so they go through the entire thickness. Eventually they seem to be, say, widest at the top and tapering off to the end somewhere there blindly inside the pitcher there, the end at different depths or lengths. So that's one type of crack, and this type of crack seems to be concentrated here around the spout. Another type of crack is here, and it's like a spider web, interwoven short sections of cracks that aren't scratches. This is not on the surface. I can't feel it from the outside, I can't feel it from the inside. This is internal cracking and short little intersecting lines there. So that's two kinds of lines. There's a third spot that just developed recently around the handle here, with cracks that are similar to the first type, where the crack lines seem to run parallel with each other, and the end, after a while, somewhere there in the handle, there we have it, the end there, as well as they also stop there. So it seems to be just on this left half of the handle there, for whatever strange reason. So the explanation about why and how plastics fail has to consider that some plastics disassemble themselves, whereas some other plastics are perfectly fine. They're perfectly fine after kids interacting with it for years. This one, the pitcher, is about 6 months old, maybe 8 months old, something like that. But this Lego is years old, and kids play with it. Look at the quality of this plastic in this windshield. Not only you can see through it flawlessly, but there are also no inclusions, no slag, no foreign bodies embedded in it, no air bubbles embedded in it, and especially no cracks, none whatsoever, no stress fractures at the corners. This is stable plastic that doesn't seem to disassemble itself. So apparently there is a right way to make plastic and there is a wrong way to make plastic. So for this reason, because kids interact with this one way more than they interact with the pitcher, just on that basis alone, I want to eliminate kids and wife from the list of possible culprits, because this plastic Lego, none of the Lego bricks ever disassemble themselves. They're not cracking at the corners. They're perfectly fine in normal use and just kids playing with them. So what's going on with the pitcher is The explanation why the cracks develop has to do with how it's made, and how the pitcher is made is a process called injection molding. In injection molding, plastic starts out as solid, not as solid rice, but as granular solid, just as rice is quite granular. Rice is a grain, so rice is absolutely granular. So plastic looks like this in its solid state. This plastic is melted down and injected into a mold cavity that looks like this pitcher. Inside the mold cavity, the mold is made up of two halves that interlock, and the cavity inside is shaped like the pitcher or the finished product, such as this toy soldier here. The cavity is made up of these two halves, and the two halves lock together and they also separate. So when they are together, molten plastic is injected at a certain temperature and a certain heat, and it solidifies inside this mold. When molten plastic is solidified, that's when the mold is open and the finished item is ejected. You can see evidence of this molding because there's a third set of lines on this one. And let's start here. There, this vertical line there. Let me just focus the camera a little better on it. There we have it. So this vertical line that runs through the entire pitcher here continues to the other side. Same here, the other half there, it continues on the handle. So the pitcher is not made of two halves, the die is made of two halves. The pitcher is not glued together of two halves. No, that's this line here is a flash. You can see how on this toy the plastic was injected at the top there, and from there on it filled the die cavity, and the two die halves met here. This is the flash line on the finished item. Some dies are made better than others. Obviously this one has a lot of flesh or more flesh and made less carefully, but it's not a problem with a toy such as this. So you can see that this flesh line is everywhere where the two die halves meet. This die cast car is also made of two halves, but no visible flesh line is on it because this one is made with great care. So how these crack lines develop, especially around the spout here, has to do with temperature and the rate of cooling. So once the molten plastic begins to solidify inside this die cavity, they don't solidify all at once. Just as water freezes, water doesn't freeze all in its entire thickness. First, just some little tiny islands form on top of liquid water, and those little islands grow and interlock. Ice slush forms, and then the top of the water is frozen, one solid layer, and then it's freezing further down until the entire thickness of water freezes. It's a process. Likewise, liquid plastic, just as liquid water, liquid plastic also cools in little islands. While it cools and solidifies, some of these islands draw liquid that surrounds the island and they add it to themselves. When they draw the liquid to themselves, there is a vacuum, but the liquid that's around the island can easily rush to the island and fill the vacuum, those little vacuum around these islands when there is enough liquid. But when there isn't enough liquid, when the islands are bigger and bigger and they start to touch each other and merge into each other, when there isn't enough liquid to share, to make up for the because plastics shrink as they solidify. To make up for this shrinkage, then this vacuum around the solidified islands will be forever interlocked into the structure of the plastic, and it is an internal stress that shows up later. This internal stress and uneven solidification can be controlled. It's possible to make plastic the right way, but it's a process that's unavoidable. The right way to control it is the plastic is hottest around the injection nozzles, and the die halves need to be heated up so the plastic doesn't cool down much from the injector tips where plastic is injected. There can be, instead of one injector tip, there can be multiple points of injecting molten plastic. There is one for this this washing machine hub. There is another one, you can see the flash around it, and there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. You see, you get the idea. So that's one way to control temperature and shrinkage, having multiple points of injection. Another one is preheating the die to a proper temperature, as well as letting the finished item cool gradually at a really tightly controlled temperature setting, so it doesn't shrink and doesn't cool rapidly and in various spots. So internal stresses are greatest around sudden change in direction, such as around the spout here, because this was made carelessly, as well as tight bends around handles or tight corners if there are sharp corners. But on sharp corners on the Lego, the sharp corners are unavoidable. It has to be a feature of the finished product, so it's cooled really carefully and controlled. Okay, that's why this one is cracked and Lego isn't. Last thing, why do these cracks develop later and show up later, and why isn't it obvious at the point of manufacturing? This is where honey comes in. Honey starts out as liquid and then continues as solid, and as it solidifies, it's getting harder and harder over time. This process is not unique to honey. Plastics go through it, concrete goes through it, metals go through it. This process is called precipitation hardening. In liquid honey, sugar is liquefied and is dissolved, but over time it precipitates out and this whole honey is getting harder and harder. Same for concrete. You start with liquid concrete, end up with solid concrete, end up with cracked concrete, because concrete is shrinking just as plastic is shrinking over time, and honey is getting harder, concrete is getting harder, the plastic is getting more and more brittle over time as well. Precipitation hardening. That's why these crack lines are developing over time and they don't show up right away at the point of manufacture, because this is a stress that's interlocked into the plastic. Dishwashing process doesn't, the heat of heating it up, cooling it down uncontrollably, heating it up, cooling it down, it doesn't make the internal stresses disappear. If anything, it makes it worse. But ultimately it's a manufacturing fault, it's the manufacturer's fault that this piece is made with this level of internal stresses in the first place, because this one doesn't go through dishwashing, but it doesn't seem to precipitation harden. It does, but it's controlled really well in the manufacture of Lego, and this one is a piece of garbage the minute it was made. So that's why this precipitation hardening, that's also applicable to, this is again the washing machine hub, but this is just made of aluminum, scaffolding grade aluminum, and many aluminum items are hardened through precipitation hardening, much like honey gets harder with the sugar precipitating out of it. So that's why the delay, months of delay between point of purchase or time of purchase and the time problems develop. And it's not going to get resolved. It's going to continue. This precipitation hardening is going to continue into infinity, eternally. It doesn't get resolved, it doesn't cure itself or fix itself, and it doesn't go away. This picture is on its way to fail, and it's going to disassemble itself. It was made wrong the first, it was made wrong at the point of manufacture. There is no fix to it.